Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Hello for K&T listeners. Thank you for joining us again. Here to talk about, not just think about, not just write about, but what? The thing that everybody's doing and nobody's talking about, sex. So today we've got James with us. We've got Dr. Jenny. We've got myself talking about all the good things that James is about to talk to us about, and we're all going to weigh in together. Of course, if you have any questions, as always, please put them into wherever you're joining us from, and we'll address them as we can. And James, you're kicking us off, man.
Oh my goodness. Well, for starters, thank you so much for having me on the Kiss and Tell magazine podcast.
Yes. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I kind of stumbled upon you, but I didn't stumble upon you because I knew know of Jay, the loveologist, and she introduced me to Dr. Jenny, and Dr. Jenny introduced me to Dr. Sabrina. So, hey, I'm here to talk about sex, love, and rock and roll. So we'll see.
Like it. Yes. So what do you have to do with sex, love, and rock and roll? Do you do it? Is it of interest to you, James? No, I'm kidding. What have you got today? What's on your mind?
I try to do it as much as I possibly can, both be on podcasts as well as have sex. And, sex is a beautiful thing. So
yes, let's talk about it.
On the professional side, I'm going to try to be as professional as I possibly can.
What does that mean exactly anyways, right?
Well, for the listeners out there, I'm hoping that the folks on Kiss and Tell that they're flexible enough, no pun intended, but pun intended, to be able to hear me go into my spiel about sex and sexuality as well as maybe kissing and telling.
Oh, beautiful.
Professionally, I entered the field back in, I guess a few moons ago. I was a student at Hampton University, and I had to learn about gender roles and gender identity. And I wanted to look at children's toy choices. And so I went from there to the University of Kentucky, and my concentration was in school psychology. So I always wanted to continue to work with kids. And then from there, Kentucky wanted me to work for a year before I went for my doctorate, but I was always afraid if I ever made any money, I'd never want to go back to school because school sometimes sucks. Let's be honest about it.
Right.
I got a brochure from the University of Pennsylvania, and I discovered that they had a human sexuality and education program. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly where I need to be.
Yep. The heavens opened up, the angels sang, you knew that was what you were supposed to do. Seems
right.
Like kind of a similar thing for us.
Yes. Out of the 70s and the 80s, I'm showing my age, I used to spend all kinds of time talking to people on their phones about their problems, sex included.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, how cool would it be if I could make some money from talking to people about their problems and talking about sex?
Yep.
So I did 6 years in the penitentiary at University of Pennsylvania in the Human Education program. But I didn't have the therapeutic skills in order to have a private practice.
Mm-hmm.
I did another 4 years at Council for Relationships based here in Philadelphia and worked for a number of different entities in the area. So my position now in the field is that I am a tenured and promoted professor at Lincoln University here in Philadelphia. It's a small HBCU in Southeast Pennsylvania. I maintain a private practice in both Pennsylvania and New Jersey, where I'm licensed. My clients come from as far north as New York City to as far south as the southern part of Maryland, because I am the only Black male ASEX certified sex therapist supervisor on the planet. And I just bought over number 2. He's out in California. It's Dr. Yamante Cooper. So then I'm also director of the Council for Relationships sex therapy program. And I'm so happy and so proud of the team around me where we have quintupled our enrollment for this next year. And I'm so happy to have, a great set of folks around me. And not only that, but we're diverse as hell.
Yeah.
So coming through, as you can imagine, in the 80s and the 90s, after I finished my degree, I was the only Black dude floating around in the damn sexuality program.
Yeah.
And so now that I'm on this side of the fence, I'm very intentional about making sure that there are diverse communities and diverse voices as a part of our sexuality program. So
Yes.
then I'm also I'm also principal of the Association of Black Sexologists and Clinicians. We've hosted conferences in the United States, in Philadelphia, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Chicago. We've done 7 iterations of our conference in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. During the last week in April, we've hosted a conference in Cape Town, South Africa,
Mm.
Prague, Czech Republic, Havana, Cuba. And then we just had our 4th iteration in San Pedro, which is outside of Belize. And this October, we will be in Montreal, Quebec. I am also the founder and editor-in-chief of the Journal of Black Sexuality and Relationships. And so that piece came about 9 years ago, this July. And I wanted to have a medium where people could share their research, clinical best practice, and pedagogy. The journal is a scholarly interdisciplinary medium where it's double-blind review. The authors don't know who they're writing to. The people who review manuscripts don't know whose manuscript they're reviewing, and in which case the journal has some pretty legs on it. The journal is now accepted at over 1,300 institutions around the world, meaning that you can go to your local or your alum university or college and hopefully see the Journal of Black Sexuality and Relationships there.
That's dope. James, can I interrupt you real quick? So you've got this beautiful list of all of these accomplishments, these firsts, these openings and these doors, and I'm loving the list, and it's beautiful. And to make this practical, relevant for the people as we're listening to all of this, is what would you say? And I know that that's changed, but what is your muse and your focus in this? I heard you start out that kids was a big focus for you. I'm hearing, of course, a lot of Black firsts things and see a need, fill a need. So that might be because of intention or because nobody else was doing it. Either way, what is your thing? What's your superpower? What in your ideal client? Who wants to see you? Why are they seeing you? Why are people coming from New York? Why are they coming from these other places? Beautiful, you've done all this awesome stuff, but why you?
Why me? Well, I would say that I am a kick-ass therapist.
Okay. Beautiful.
That's the starting point.
Yes.
And then the second point is that with the clients who I see, they feel as if they can be themselves across the board. So what's nice about my practice is that it funnels into conversations around decolonization, where when I show up for therapy, I show up just like I am. I have my WWE and Marvel superheroes scattered throughout the room, and then there are pictures around the room that represent the 70s and the 80s. And so in having that kind of collaborative or egalitarian or feminist or womanist perspective around how I join with my clients, they come back. But because my business model is to work myself out of a job, I'm not taking clients and holding on to them for years and years and years like some of my colleagues might. I see my clients, we set goals. I'm very goal focused. I'm intentional, but I'm also process driven. So I need to know how you're feeling about talking to me. I'm going to tell you how I feel about talking to you about whatever issues are. And it's been really, really good. And I'm blessed in so many different ways.
Yes. So, I've got questions. Jenny, of course, if you've got whatever's. So, James. Go ahead.
We do have comments.
Yes. Yep. Courtney joined us. I'm welcoming and no questions yet, but of course, if we get some.
One thing that you said that you wanted to talk about, James, was why men don't kiss and tell. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. So some of us struggle with how we conceptualize masculinity femininity, and gender expression. So sometimes we struggle with offering our partners or even ourselves a sense of our own vulnerability and the identities that we take on. So if I subscribe to this hegemonic masculine or toxic masculinity, then I'm aggressive, I'm dominant, I'm assertive, I'm non-emotive, I'm a caretaker, yada, yada, yada. But then in terms of kissing and telling, and which involves intimacy and vulnerability, I'm like, oh, hell no. I don't want to tell you too much, because then I would have to become something else that I might feel uncomfortable with. So use this for an example. So I'm here in Philadelphia, right? And I had a client who, what the presenting issue was erectile dysfunction, right? So he came in, no pun intended. He came in and we had a chance to talk about obviously his relationship and his erectile dysfunction. But 2 summers ago, there was a gentleman in West Philadelphia who got into an argument with his family, and the argument spilled out onto the street, and then he was killed due to law enforcement violence, right? So in Philadelphia, there was this big, people were protesting, and some of the protesters became rioters. So then we had helicopters whirring around West Philadelphia where I live at. We have all this chaos going on. My client comes in and he says, James, I don't want to talk to you about intimacy with my partner. I want to tell you how difficult it is to be a Black man in West Philadelphia and not fear getting shot. So then if we apply notions of hegemonic masculinity, you have one Black man talking to another Black man about his fear of being Black. Then alongside of that, we're having conversations about how he fears for his life in the face of law enforcement violence, where when he is confronted by a law official, he's expected to be submissive, he's expected to be passive, and he's expected to acquiesce. Then when he gets home with this partner, who identifies as African American, he's expected to share, but then possibly have an erect penis to engage in intercourse or some form of sex play. And so he has all these different issues that have emerged that we have a chance to unpack and process. So kissing and telling isn't necessarily the right thing for everybody, but as therapists, we make the assumption that vulnerability has to be around kissing and telling and being vulnerable.
Yeah, Jenny, you got something first?
No, go ahead.
I'll be like, bleh, and I'm ready to be like, ooh, I have things. So first, super fabulous for those that, for any that stuck with it to hear the story on how did these things two correlate, right? Because in the beginning, I thought we're talking about kiss and tell, and I thought we're talking about sex, and I thought we're talking about blah, 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 blah. And this is the real stuff. It's in James and Jenny, we know that especially for ED in particular, that most of the time, it's very rare that I actually see somebody who truly has erectile dysfunction. It's most of the time, it's anxiety, right? It's a performance anxiety of some sort that I'm expected to show up with a dick in my hand or whatever, ready to go, regardless of what's going on wherever else. So thank you for taking us on that little journey to see how these things correlate, because these things matter. The regular day stuff is coming with us into the bedroom. We'd like to think that if we close the door, God and everything else stays outside of it, but that's not exactly how it works, is it now? So Thank you for sharing that. The thing that I want to say in response or whatever's is here, let me take this, that from the kiss and tell perspective, I totally hear you on the not vulnerable. There's real big emotional stuff going on. And I also have been in the conversations on the other side. What was kiss and tell all day? Me and hanging out with the boys, and the boys hanging out with the boys. And of course, there's no emotional stuff in, this is the physical, primal, wild, passionate monkey scrumping we're talking about. Who did you smash? What did you do? We're not going into details. We're not talking about all that. So from that perspective, there's tons of kiss and tell that I hear then, and this, overinflated thing that we're doing. So I'm feeling two tensions of the opposites, if you will, right? That there's a whole lot of talking about it, not in a useful way. That's just kind of fun and banter. And then there's, the for real stuff on where healing and transformation can actually take place. Bridging these two, keeping someone engaged and interested enough in their own beautiful outcome to stick with themselves long enough in the boring part. What do we say about that? What is there something, is there a way then that, I don't even know what I'm asking, but have we figured out a way, or have you figured out a way, James, in particular, because you're really kind of carrying, spearheading this tension in particular, I think.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. And I was thinking about the different interpretations of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
It is kissing, telling, holding hands, sharing secrets, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for some of us guys, some people don't have a skill set to talk about their feelings because either they haven't been taught or they've been taught and that skill set has been rejected.
Yes.
So there's a behavioral skill set around negotiating intimacy, but then there's also the emotional skill set that runs neck and neck with it. Because if I'm not motivated, or if I'm not feeling you, I'm not digging you, I don't want to be around you, then I'm not going to use the skills that I need in order to have the kind of intimate transaction with you that you think that I should have with you. I'm good because I'm all day long on my phone. I can send you a text message. But when it comes down to you and I having this one-on-one or one-on-two or two-on-one conversation, I'm like, I'm good.
Who wants to do that?
Right.
I need incentive. There's no incentive for that.
Right.
Yeah.
But for some guys, some people, it's about survival. Like, yeah, we're together. I might take you out to dinner. I might cook dinner for you. I might do whatever. But the bottom line is that for sometimes we don't connect in a real way, not because I'm not digging you. It's that I just don't feel like talking to you. But you and I, we can sit here and watch Netflix. We can watch the game that's coming on tonight. Go Sixers, even though they're not playing. But we can do this together. But do I want to talk about it?
Yeah,
probably not.
Right.
We can, after we watch the game, we can go upstairs and smash if that's what you want to do.
See, this is where we would then say, oh, you're totally acting like a boy. And now girl getting all the feelings hurt. And, oh, it's just about listen, we need to really stop being so upset about the differences that make men and make women. You just talked, you mentioned one. We can sit next to each other and do the thing. I don't want to talk to you. It doesn't mean I don't love you or don't like. I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk. There's a thing on. That's why I'm watching the thing, right? Whereas women were like, but wait, why? I love this. And not all women for sure, but there's this moment.
Right.
Why are we getting all upset about the fact he wants to just watch the daggone thing? And then if he wants to go upstairs. All right. So how do we then not take this personally? Really, I think is what we're saying is how do we meet and understand intimacy then and what that means? And then talking, number one, ladies or men for that matter, doesn't always mean intimacy. Just like sex doesn't mean intimacy. And you started to say, what is this definition? Are you, we've talked about this lots, on particularly, but what does that mean? Let's define it. What are you finding that you're repeating that's on repeat? You have a speech prepared, whether or not, we mean to have one or not. When you bump up against this with your clients and things, how do you help folks exactly address this issue? Guys, you weren't taught. You're right. So now what?
So I would invite my clients to talk about what is being said when they're not talking. And tell me about the multiple interpretations over time, context, and circumstance. Because not talking on a Tuesday night at 7:19 is not talking. So then when you or we invite our clients to talk about the interpretations of not talking, hopefully in a safer space, then maybe the couple or triad or polycule can come together and say, okay, now I understand why you weren't talking at this particular time. I know that it's not an indictment on the relationship. I know that you still love me, and it's okay if we don't have to say anything to each other. Or okay if we say everything to each other.
when the feelings, when the just beingness, right? Like that's a whole nother skill,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's worth saying that it's a skill. I think a lot of us think that we're supposed to have it or we're born with it.
Mhm.
The consensus seems to be that most of us didn't learn it. If we were supposed to, we didn't, you know?
Mhm.
And so now trying to navigate this, here's the other skill that I think is worth mentioning. That's a skill that only lawyers seem to have that would really benefit people that are trying to relate with other people. And in particular, then, especially if we're talking about these partners and lovers, where now it's not just being friends, we're trying to interact and be lovers and be all these different things for one another and for ourselves, is lawyers learn and practice and talking about intimacy and sharing and vulnerability and feelings, and depending on how you were raised with those ideas, right,
Mhm.
is how to articulate yourself when emotionally activated
Yeah.
all by itself, right? If you're a lawyer, you practice that. You even practice it with your client, right? We know that if you've watched TV, we've all watched TV, that if they've got a client and they've killed somebody, and we want to make sure that you don't go to jail, then what do? They grill them and they test them and ask them questions like what cross exam is going to do to get them emotional, to get them frustrated, because then they're going to slip and say all the tea, right? Even people that haven't done anything wrong, that's especially like even victims for this matter. It's how do you articulate, be able to have a debate or an argument while on a topic that is activating for someone. I'm
Right.
pointing that out in the degree that I am because we think that we're supposed to just know how to do this. This goes into conflict resolution. If we
Mhm.
look at any of the issues in any relationship, it's communication when activated.
Right.
And so then we've got to get better at this, right? How do you, or how are you finding that you're having to help support this? But particularly, let's bring it back into kind of the kiss and tell, and even within sexuality. If emotions and this conversation hasn't been taught, and then we're now trying to teach and give vocabulary, we're
Mhm.
also trying to develop the skill of how does one articulate whenever we know what's happening. Emotional flooding wants to happen, all these things. How do you still articulate, get your point across, especially to the loved one when you're stating what you need, already being vulnerable, trying not to be triggered by the trigger. The trigger is being vulnerable.
Mhm.
Yes? How do we deal with this? What's some good ways that we could help listeners and the folks that are in that position? Boundaries, I don't know those. I wasn't taught communication. I wasn't taught conflict resolution. I'm just trying to survive. What's some easier, accessible things that maybe we might have for our friends listening?
Yeah. So what I do for my clients is that we actually practice emotional intelligence every session, start
Mhm.
and end, and then I actually send them a check-in activity where
Mm,
the check-in activity invites them to share how they feel physically, emotionally, sexually, intimately, and spiritually.
love that.
Physically, obviously, is how does your body feel right now?
Yeah.
Just be in the moment.
Yep.
Hot, tired, cold, thirsty, hungry, whatever.
Yep.
Emotionally, there are probably like 70 different descriptors on the bottom of the first page of the document. And I have that many descriptors because I don't want my clients to come in and tell me that they're fine, they're okay, they're all right, they're
Right.
cool, they're straight. And
Yeah.
tell me anything.
Yeah.
Sexually intimately relates to how close or how distant the couple or triad or polycule feel towards each other. And that language is needed because I can be mad at you all day long, still feel close to you, and
Mm-hmm.
still feel horny and want to get in the bed with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then spiritually, it's how close or how distant one feels towards his, her, their higher power. Their higher power could be God, Allah, Yahweh, nature, Buddha, music, sun. It's that entity that allows them to be at peace. So
Mm-hmm.
then I have my couples actually practice that at the beginning of the session, at the end of the session, and they do their check-in. And then I give them the homework assignment to do it at home. It becomes easier for them
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
reveal that portion of themselves to their partners more often than they would had we not done that.
Yeah, totes. Giving them real practical tools. We do have a question. If there's more, please, say more on that. But we do have a question that I want to make sure that we get to real quick. And Jenny, we talked a bit about this on one of the other sessions. So Courtney, I've only been kissed on the cheek by a guy friend at the night camp for those with epilepsy that I went in the summer when I was 17. This is on PDA. Why is it difficult for some people to see others kissing in public?
Yeah.
What do we have? We also just have a few minutes left, friends. So just letting us all know that whatever our responses are, let's keep them quick. And then James, we can have you exit us out. But yes. Jenny, what do you have? PDA, what about it?
Well, we can stay longer if we want to.
That is true. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, we can. Anyway, as far as sorry, I have a cold. As far as public affection, why do people uncomfortable with it? Because most people were taught you're not supposed to do that in public. Mm-hmm. So it makes people uncomfortable for that reason. I mean, it's silly, but it's true. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But then the problem is if they're just kissing, that's one thing. But then if it becomes something totally different, that they can't keep their hands off of each other and they look like they're about to get undressed, then that's a whole different situation.
Appropriateness, right? Yeah. The subjective appropriateness. Right. So, subjective.
Right, we all define that differently.
Right.
Some of us think that's fine too, depending on where you live.
Mm-hmm. So I think, Courtney, I wonder is it difficult for you to see other people? Do you experience that? And lots of us have, even if we also notice that we have a different threshold. It can be different, and it can even be circumstantial sometimes. And I will say then we also know that there's certain groups of people that don't want to see other certain groups of people in any sorts of acts of love, right? We're starting to get into what other people would say they don't want kids to see, what really it's what they don't want to see because they don't want to have to address it, right? It challenges ideas of intimacy and wild, passionate monkey scrumping and permission. And when other people get to see that, who is it making uncomfortable? Those would be the questions too. If you notice that some people would say things, are those the folks, they don't give themselves as much permission maybe to express, maybe they don't at all. Maybe they don't have, that's a non-existent part for themselves. Maybe there's trauma. There's all kinds of things and reasons, that in my experience, and just as we know, everybody's very, very different on what they would want to do for what love expression feels good to them and what they feel comfortable seeing. And there again, I think the last piece is we don't, as people, trust other humans. So because of that, we don't trust other humans to do what we think is appropriate. And how does any one person know what you think is appropriate? You know what I mean? Is there even an answer or there's no right answer, right? James, what you got?
Yeah, I was thinking about how sometimes when people have an intimate encounter with someone else, and then if there are people who out there in the world who feel uncomfortable, sometimes the people out there in the world, they project their stuff onto the people who are making out. Mm-hmm. And as Brina, as you alluded to, sometimes people come from, families or backgrounds that may have trauma in it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people come from families or background where conversations about intimacy weren't addressed. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people come from families or backgrounds where intimacy in relationships is discouraged until there's some sort of commitment. And so for all of these reasons, in a Judeo-Christian culture, and some of the macro issues, sometimes it's difficult for people to watch other people hold hands, make out, touch each other in any particular kind of way. And so for those people, I think there is some empathy and compassion that should be extended to them. But
Mm-hmm.
the bottom line is that hopefully there's a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy that the listener or the caller had a chance to ask that question, because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately we're having a conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
that person who asked the question, that person can have the conversation with his, her, or their partners, colleagues, friends, and family.
Yes. I want to add if Courtney is who's chatting with us, and she's been with us before. I'm only saying things that she's offered publicly. And so I'm sharing her comment here. Yes, I'm uncomfortable even seeing family members do it to each other. For me, I think it goes back to messages with those with disabilities. So I'm bringing that up, that she has disabilities, epilepsy, she mentioned in the thing before. So others are other abled friends. And then on the topic of sexuality, right? So she's saying, for me, I think it goes back to messages. Those with disabilities sometimes internalize that they are unlovable for the way they are. Not only unlovable, right, Courtney, but a lot of times just for this population, then they're treated as children. We're treated as not adults capable of making own decisions. And of course, we know that there's varying degrees for folks and their capabilities on that topic, right? But thank you for being, for being honest and for sharing this. And totally, absolutely, our culture as a culture doesn't do well addressing all the time just sexuality, let alone for other. And when I say other, in our society, I'm not meaning because I think it's other, it's whatever society is called other, that they shouldn't be sexual. Old people, those with disabilities, and whoever else we've put in that list. And we have decided as a culture that you're not sexual people. So yes, you've got another layer, that you might be experiencing on that topic. Is there anything then, James? First, I want to say too is if you need to go, James, then feel free. Otherwise, I think we're, Jenny, we're just hanging out for a little bit.
James, you need to go.
Yeah, and to finish answering this question, is there anything either of you want to add to that, or with Courtney?
Yeah, I kind of do need to go.
Yes, yes, that's no
While
problem.
I'm a podcast guest,
Yep.
I'm also a dad, and my
Yes.
son, my 9-year-old, came down to ask for another slice of cake.
Yes.
So to keep him from burning the house down and cutting himself,
Yes.
I probably should go.
Yes. We'll only be for a few more minutes too. James, thank you so much for being here and for bringing your wisdom, being a freaking pioneer and a GD badass, for representation, for giving voice, for bringing the issues up, for giving useful tools in communication to peoples that really need to have it. We need the representation we need more of the helping of the reparenting, this meeting people where they're at and the way that you're meeting them. So thank you for the good work that you're doing in the world. And thank you then for your time with us and getting to share your wisdom.
Thank you, James.
All right.
Take good care. Have a good one. So yes, bye-bye. Jenny, then just even to wrap, this up, unless there's more questions that do come in, is there anything then more, because it's not then just a disabilities issue, that folks that have issues, again, there is another layer, but just even being uncomfortable seeing family, if you're not raised with parents that are that way, right, Courtney, or any of us, if your parents don't demonstrate PDA, then of course, if you go out in the world, then it's going to look like PDA. So everyone's got varying degrees for that, don't they? On how comfortable and how did their parents, it's not even just comfortable, but how did your parents agree to show their care and their love and their physical, attention in that way, right? That makes sense. Jenny, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's all on what we were taught. And as we know with the topic of sex, we're not taught any of this. I mean, you're not taught about PDA, you're not taught about sex, you're not taught, how to communicate about wants and needs, so that's part of the reason Kiss and Tell magazine is out there to help with that.
Yes.
So
yes. Thank you. And thank you so much, Courtney. Thank you for asking. Jay, seeing you there, and Ashley, and those and everyone that came to join us. And I see some of the other folks. I can't always see, names and all that. Thank you for joining us here for Kiss and Tell. Thank you for our writers and those that contribute and those that are asking questions and you being involved in the conversation with us. Keep them coming. Whatever you've got.
Yep.
Let's get some hard stuff. Let's get some, let's talk about whatever it is that you need to talk about. Jenny, take us home. What have we got in a couple of weeks? Who do we have? What's going on?
We'll be here June 21st and with Ava Ash, and we're going to talk about the benefits of using Tantra. So,
yes, Tantra. So, real fast, friends, we had Dr. James Wadley on with us today. If you want to hear and learn more about him and his work, then go on to Kiss and Tell. We'll have some links and kissandtellmagazine.com to find out more information. As you heard, he is spearheading, doing a lot of stuff in a lot of areas for folks that didn't have that representation before. Big, beautiful things. So Dr. James Wadley, thank you so much for being on. And you heard it. In 2 weeks, we're going to have Ash. Excuse me. Ash, Ava, Ash. Yes. On the show, thank you, to talk to us about Tantra. For those that don't know what that means, you're going to want to come here. You're going to want to watch this just to give a brief idea. Americans' ideas of it tends to be about how do you have multiple orgasms that last hours and hours. If you saw the movie American Pie, then you have an idea. Obviously, there's lots more to it than that. We're going to learn some good things, but we might learn how to have orgasms that last hours. Either way, I'm not going to miss out if that's the possibility. We'll see you all in 2 weeks here at 7:00, kissandtellmagazine.com. You all have an amazing freaking evening. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Yes. Good night, friends.
Good night.